Your tomatoes are barely producing. Your cucumbers look sad, and those peppers? Let's not even talk about it. Meanwhile, your neighbor's garden looks like it belongs in a magazine spread. What gives? Here's what nobody tells you. Those branches heavy with fruit, those peppers so abundant they're giving them away by the bagful? It's not luck. It's not better soil. And it's definitely not some expensive proprietary fertilizer from the garden center. It's 1 tablespoon of something you probably walked past this morning. Something so simple, so absurdly cheap, that the gardening industry would rather you didn't know about it. Because if you did, well, you'd stop buying their overpriced bottles of promises. Keep watching and find out what it is. Let's start with why your plants are struggling in the first place. And no, it's not because you forgot to water them that one Tuesday in July. The real problem runs deeper. Literally, your soil is starving. Not in the way you think, though. See, most gardeners assume plants need 3 things: nitrogen for leafy growth, phosphorus for roots, and potassium for fruit production. The famous NPK ratio plastered on every fertilizer bag at the hardware store. But here's where it gets interesting. Those 3 nutrients? They're like telling someone they only need carbs, protein, and fat to survive. Technically true, practically useless. Because what about the dozens of other compounds your body needs? The vitamins, the minerals, the trace elements that make the difference between surviving and thriving. Plants are the same way. They need magnesium for chlorophyll production, calcium for cell wall strength, sulfur for protein synthesis, iron, manganese, zinc, boron, copper, molybdenum. The list goes on. These aren't optional extras. They're essential. And most commercial fertilizers? They're leaving your plants nutritionally bankrupt. Now you might be thinking, okay, so I need a more complete fertilizer. Time to drop $50 on some fancy organic blend with 17 ingredients I can't pronounce. Nope. Because the secret ingredient we're talking about, it contains over 60 trace minerals. Not 3, not 17, 60 plus. And it costs about as much as a coffee. For a year's supply. I'm talking about Epsom salt. The fun stuff? The same thing your grandmother soaked her feet in. The same crystals sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now, probably expired and forgotten behind the shampoo bottles. Thinking this is just another garden myth. Hang with me here. Because what's about to happen is we're going to dig into the actual science, the real chemistry, and by the end you're going to understand exactly why this works, how to use it, and more importantly, how not to screw it up. Let's talk about what Epsom salt actually is. The chemical name is magnesium sulfate. 2 elements your plants are absolutely desperate for, bound together in a form they can absorb immediately. No waiting for soil microbes to break it down. No complex chemical processes. Just straight-up available nutrition. Magnesium first. You know, that green stuff that lets plants photosynthesize? Your plants literally cannot convert sunlight into energy. They're like solar panels with half the circuits disconnected. Sure, they'll survive, but they're running at maybe 30% capacity. And here's the thing about magnesium deficiency. It's sneaky. It doesn't show up as dramatic wilting or obvious disease. It shows up as yellowing between the leaf veins, as bitter-tasting vegetables, as that general sense that your plants are just kind of underwhelming. Sound familiar? Yeah, thought so. Now let's talk about sulfur. This is the forgotten nutrient. Everyone obsesses over nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Meanwhile, sulfur is over in the corner, quietly being essential for protein synthesis, enzyme function, and vitamin production. It's what makes your tomatoes taste like tomatoes instead of watery red spheres. It's what gives peppers their aromatic compounds. It's what makes cucumbers crisp instead of mushy. Commercial fertilizers used to include sulfur as a side effect. The old formulations, the ones your grandparents used, they came from materials that naturally contain sulfur compounds. But modern fertilizers? They've been purified, refined, made more efficient. Which is corporate speak for we removed all the good stuff to save money. So your plants are sulfur deficient. They're magnesium deficient. Producing maybe half what they could be producing. And you're standing there thinking you just have a brown thumb. You don't have a brown thumb. You have depleted soil and incomplete nutrition. And we're about to fix that. Here's how this actually works in practice. When you dissolve Epsom salt in water and apply it to your plants, Whether as a soil drench or a foliar spray, you're delivering these nutrients directly to where they're needed. The magnesium gets absorbed through the roots or the leaves and immediately starts getting incorporated into chlorophyll molecules. Photosynthesis efficiency goes up. Energy production increases. And suddenly, your plant has the resources to do what it was designed to do. Grow, flower, set fruit. The sulfur works similarly. It gets absorbed and immediately starts being used in protein synthesis, in enzyme production, in all those invisible chemical processes that separate a thriving plant from a surviving one. But here's where most people mess this up. They hear Epsom salt is good for plants, and they go absolutely crazy with it. They're dumping cups of the stuff around their tomatoes. They're mixing tablespoons into spray bottles. They're basically salting their garden like it's a Roman conquest. Don't do that. Because here's the thing about nutrients. More is not better. More is just more. And in many cases, more is actively harmful. Think about it like this. You need vitamin A. It's essential. Without it, you go blind. But if you take massive doses of vitamin A, you get vitamin A toxicity. Your liver starts failing. Your bones weaken. The dose makes the poison, as the old saying goes. Same with plants. A little magnesium and sulfur? Game changer. Too much? You start locking out other nutrients. You create ionic imbalances in the soil. You can even burn the roots through osmotic stress. So let's get specific. Let's talk about the actual application rates that work. The amounts that have been tested, proven, and refined by actual gardeners getting actual results. You want 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt per gallon of water. That's it. That's the magic ratio. You mix that up and apply it as a soil drench around the base of the plant. Not on the leaves for this application. Around the roots, where it can be absorbed and transported throughout the plant. When do you apply it? First application goes in when you transplant your seedlings into the garden. You're giving them a magnesium and sulfur boost right as they're dealing with transplant shock, right as they're trying to establish themselves. This is when they need it most. Second application comes when you see the first flowers forming. This is the critical transition point, when the plant shifts from vegetative growth to reproductive growth. It needs extra resources to set fruit. You're providing them. Third application happens when the first fruits are about golf ball sized. The plant is now supporting both continued growth and fruit development. The nutrient demand is peaking. You're meeting that demand. That's 3 applications total over the growing season. Not weekly, not daily, 3 times. Because remember, we're not trying to force feed the plant. We're correcting a deficiency and then maintaining adequate levels. The approach is slightly different. Cucumbers are heavy feeders with a shorter growing season. They're trying to cram all their growth and production into 8 to 10 weeks. They need consistent nutrition. Here you want 1 tablespoon per gallon. Same as tomatoes, but applied every 2 weeks once the vines start running. Not before. When they're young seedlings, they don't need it yet. But once those vines take off, they're growing several inches per day. They're putting out flowers. They're setting fruit. They need fuel. You can also do a foliar application with cucumbers. Half a tablespoon per gallon of water in a spray bottle. Spray the undersides of the leaves in the evening, never in full sun. Why the undersides? That's where the stomata are, the tiny pores that allow absorption. And why evening? Because you want the solution to sit on the leaves and be absorbed, not evaporate in the hot sun. Peppers are the interesting ones. They're more drought tolerant than tomatoes or cucumbers. They're native to warmer climates. They're adapted to less than ideal conditions. But that doesn't mean they don't benefit from proper nutrition. For peppers, you want 1 tablespoon per gallon applied at transplanting, just like tomatoes. Then again when the first flowers appear, and here's the trick with peppers. If you want them to produce like crazy, if you want branches literally bending under the weight of fruit, you give them 1 more application right after you harvest the first flush of peppers. Why? Because harvesting triggers the plant to produce more. It's an evolutionary adaptation. In nature, if a pepper ripens and gets eaten by a bird, the plant's genes get spread. So the plant is programmed to respond to fruit removal by making more fruit. You're giving it the nutrients to actually follow through on that programming. But let's talk about what you're going to see. Because this isn't magic. It's not going to transform your garden overnight. What it does is create the conditions for optimal growth. And optimal growth takes time. Week 1 after application, you probably won't notice much. Maybe the leaves look a bit darker, a bit greener. Week 2, the growth rate increases. New leaves emerge faster. The stems thicken. The plant looks more robust, more vigorous. Week 3, this is when flowering increases noticeably. More flower clusters on tomatoes. More female flowers on cucumbers. More blooms on peppers. Week 4 and beyond. This is when fruit production takes off. More fruits set. The fruits size up faster. The flavors intensify. And you start understanding why that neighbor's garden looks so good. They knew something you didn't. Now you know it too. But we need to talk about the mistakes. Because knowing what to do is only half the battle. Knowing what not to do is just as important. Mistake number 1 is applying Epsom salt to plants that don't need it. Not every plant is magnesium or sulfur deficient. Some soils naturally have adequate levels. Some plants are less demanding. If you're growing in fresh, well-amended soil with plenty of compost, you might not need supplemental Epsom salt at all. How do you know? Look at your plants. Yellowing between leaf veins with the veins staying green? That's classic magnesium deficiency. Stunted growth, pale new leaves, reduced fruit production, possible sulfur deficiency. No symptoms? Then you're probably fine without it. Mistake number 2 is mixing Epsom salt with calcium-containing fertilizers. Magnesium and calcium compete for absorption. If you apply both at the same time, you're basically making them fight for entry into the plant. Neither gets absorbed efficiently. If you're using something like bone meal or lime, apply it at a different time than your Epsom salt treatment. Give them each their own window. Mistake number 3 is applying it in full sun. Whether as a soil drench or foliar spray, you want to apply in the evening or on overcast days. Why? Because magnesium sulfate in solution creates an ionic solution. In full sun, that can cause leaf burn through a lens effect, where water droplets focus sunlight. Evening application avoids this entirely. Mistake number 4 is using it on every single plant in your garden. Brassicas like cabbage and broccoli, they don't need it. Beans and peas, they fix their own nitrogen and have different nutrient needs. Root vegetables like carrots and beets, they need different nutrient profiles. Epsom salt is specifically beneficial for fruiting plants. Cucumbers, squash, melons, that's where it shines. Now let's talk about cost, because this matters. A bag of Epsom salt at any pharmacy or grocery store costs maybe $5. That bag contains roughly 8 pounds. At 1 tablespoon per gallon. And let's say you have 10 plants that need 3 applications each over the season. You're using maybe 2 cups total. 2 cups out of 8 pounds. You've spent $5 on enough fertilizer to last multiple growing seasons. Compare that to the $20 bottle of tomato fertilizer that lasts maybe 1 season if you're lucky. The math isn't even close. But here's what makes this really interesting. The results aren't just about quantity. Yes, you'll get more tomatoes, more cucumbers, more peppers. That's the obvious benefit, but the quality improves too. And this is what most people don't talk about. Tomatoes with adequate magnesium and sulfur taste better. They're sweeter, more complex, more tomatoey. The reason is that sulfur is a component of many aromatic compounds. The things that give tomatoes their characteristic flavor. You get bland tomatoes. With it, you get that deep, rich flavor that makes you actually want to eat them straight off the vine. Cucumbers become crunchier. The cell walls are stronger because the plant has the nutrients to build them properly. You know how sometimes cucumbers get soft and watery? That's often a magnesium deficiency issue. The plant can't maintain proper cell structure. And suddenly your cucumbers actually have that satisfying snap when you bite into them. Peppers become more aromatic and flavorful. The capsaicin production increases in hot peppers. The sweet peppers develop better flavor profiles. The walls get thicker and meatier. These are all downstream effects of having adequate sulfur for protein and enzyme synthesis. This is what separates okay produce from incredible produce. It's not just about having more. It's about having better. And that comes down to complete nutrition. Now here's something most gardening advice skips over. The relationship between soil health and fertilizer efficacy. Because you can apply all the Epsom salt in the world. But if your soil biology is shot, if you have no microbial activity, if the soil structure is compacted and lifeless, you're not going to get great results. Epsom salt works best in living soil. Soil with organic matter. Soil with earthworms and beneficial bacteria and fungi. Because healthy soil acts as a buffer. It holds nutrients in plant-available forms. It prevents leaching. It maintains proper pH. So if you're working with dead, depleted soil, start with compost first. Build organic matter, get the biology working. Then add the Epsom salt to supplement what the soil can't provide. The two work together synergistically. You can also combine Epsom salt with other amendments for even better results. A mixture of 1 tablespoon Epsom salt and 1 tablespoon fish emulsion per gallon of water gives you the magnesium and sulfur plus a nitrogen boost and trace minerals from the fish. It's like a multivitamin for your plants. Or try 1 tablespoon Epsom salt and 1 tablespoon blackstrap molasses per gallon. The molasses feeds soil microbes, while the Epsom salt feeds the plants. The microbes become more active, breaking down organic matter and releasing additional nutrients. It's a two-pronged approach that compounds the benefits. Some gardeners swear by adding a 1/4 teaspoon of borax to their Epsom salt mixture for tomatoes. Boron is essential for calcium transport and fruit development. Tomatoes are notorious for blossom end rot, which is calcium-related. The boron helps move calcium to the developing fruits. Just be very careful with borax. A 1/4 teaspoon per gallon is plenty. More than that and you risk boron toxicity. The really interesting applications come when you start thinking about specific problems. Got tomatoes with leaf curl? Could be magnesium deficiency. Epsom salt often fixes it within 2 weeks. Peppers dropping blossoms before setting fruit. Magnesium deficiency affects flowering hormone production. Again, Epsom salt to the rescue. Cucumbers producing mostly male flowers with no fruit. Stress from nutrient deficiency. You're seeing a pattern here. This is why that 1 tablespoon becomes such a game changer. It's not just about bigger harvests, though that's certainly part of it. It's about solving problems you didn't even realize were nutritionally based. It's about unlocking the genetic potential your plants already have, but couldn't express because they were missing key nutrients. And here's the best part. This isn't some untested theory. This has been used by commercial growers for decades. They just don't advertise it because there's no profit in telling home gardeners that a $5 bag of Epsom salt outperforms their $50 specialty fertilizers. But you talk to any serious market gardener, anyone growing vegetables professionally, and ask them what they use on their tomatoes. 9 times out of 10, Epsom salt is in the mix. Because when your livelihood depends on production, you use what actually works, not what has the prettiest packaging. The same goes for greenhouse operations. Commercial tomato greenhouses use magnesium sulfate regularly. They inject it into their irrigation systems. They foliar spray it on weekly schedules. Because they've done the math, they know that adequate magnesium and sulfur means more fruit, better fruit, and higher profits. You're just scaling that knowledge down to your backyard garden. You're applying the same principles the professionals use, and you're getting professional-level results because you're using professional-level knowledge. So let's bring this all together. Applied at transplanting, at first flowering, and at first fruit sizing for tomatoes and peppers. Every 2 weeks for cucumbers. Once vines are running, applied as a soil drench in the evening, or on overcast days. Not every plant, just fruiting plants, that benefit from the specific nutrients magnesium sulfate provides. Do that, and watch what happens. Watch the leaf color deepen. Watch the growth rate accelerate. Watch the flowering increase. Watch the fruit set and size up and multiply until you're the neighbor everyone's asking about. The one with the garden that looks magazine ready. The one giving away produce by the bagful because you literally can't eat it all. That's not luck. That's not genetics. That's not even particularly hard work. That's just giving your plants what they need to do what they were designed to do. Grow abundantly, produce prolifically, thrive, instead of merely survive. 1 tablespoon. That's all it takes. The secret's out. Now go use it.